There we go. Howdy, folks. Happy Monday. No problems here. And nothing ever happens in late August, right? Nothing in the hockey world is boring, and everybody's just counting the days until training camp. Oh yeah. Okay. Well, we have some stuff to talk about, but we'll start first with the pre-show. Go ahead, Russ.
All right, so let's talk about the New York Mets because they haven't been talked about enough this year. So lately with Javi Baez. And this wasn't the first time the other day. He's done this a few times. He's doing a thumbs down when he gets on second base or home plate or whatever. The Mets usually do this when they get a hit or whatever, and he's doing the opposite. And the reason he's doing the opposite is because the fans booing him. And with the fans booing him, he decided, well, you know what? We're going to boo you, and this is our way of booing you. So when we do well, you're going to have to do better. And it's like, and I've spoken to a few people. I was, at Flyers camp, and so I've spoken to people who had still cover Major League Baseball, and this is really the problem. I'm not even going to put it all on Baez or Lindor, who decided to do it too, even though he's got a 660-something OPS and is not really the worst year of his career, but he's hitting like close by Erga territory when he was with the Mets. Right. The issue is that today's Major League Baseball players are so far removed from the fans that they don't understand what makes a fan tick and what angers a fan and how fans think. And based on that, they feel like, hey, you should be cheering us every minute because otherwise you're putting pressure on us. And my answer is Mike Piazza, when he became a Met, there were tons of expectations. There was a bad team. For 2 weeks, maybe 2.5, he didn't get a hit. And people started to boo him. All of a sudden it clicked. Piazza started hitting. He never got booed again. That's how New York works. That's how a lot of towns work.
And Kev, I brought up the example of a guy like Giancarlo Stanton with the Yankees. His career with them has not been great, and he's been booed mercilessly at times. But there's never been a reaction going forward. I mean, people don't realize in baseball, somebody who fails 7 out of 10 times and has a career of 15 years is called a Hall of Famer. So, it's I get why fans react the way they do with certain players in certain key situations, but the player turning it around and making gestures to the fans, I think Russ is right. They have lost touch with the reality and what's going on.
Yeah, it's a good phrasing of that because they lack a basic understanding of how the system works. Like, their multi-million-dollar contracts are based on fan support. Without the fans, there's the revenue stream for baseball, whether it's watching on television or whatever, it just wouldn't exist. And it's inherent within your contract, even if it's not written in there specifically, that, you should basically, they're stockholders. Fans are stockholders in what you're going on. And for them to, what they're saying is we're booing the fans because they're not performing. Well, that's whole concept is ludicrous. And if I was management, I would be steaming man about all this. I'd be walking.
That's the other problem, Kev. So that's the other big problem. So for a website that I write for, Full Press, I did an article 3 days ago and said that Luis Rojas should be fired. And I named out all the reasons. Well, this is now another reason because this should never have had to go to upper management to put out a press release. The manager should have nipped this in the bud when it started, but he didn't because he just lets the players do whatever they want. And that's how this kind of thing snowballs.
And this is sort of conducive to the dysfunction that the Mets have been under. I mean, even though they have a multi-billion-dollar owner in Steve Cohen, and he, I think, made a mistake in signing Lindor to a contract that he would never have gotten next in the offseason based on the year that he's having. But, he wanted to lock in an all-star shortstop. I get that. But the dysfunction with the general manager who was fired because of harassing issues, sending pictures on his phone, to a number of other things that have just really not fit with that organization. And now the new owner comes in. He's probably going to fire the existing manager, the one he assumed. The roster could be in complete flux. Their best player, one of the probably a future Hall of Famer in DeGrom, the health questions, and there's just a number of things that have just fallen apart here. And I mean, Russ, they're more fun to watch than the '70s Yankees with Steinbrenner.
Yeah, they're reaching that territory, and it's not like the manager's causing all this because he's outspoken. The manager's causing all of this because he doesn't do anything. So then the players run roughshod. They decide they're running the team, and then you get a situation like this. Now, people think, hey, this will just be in the news for one day and it'll blow over. It won't.
No,
this is going to take like a week. Not New York. This will take like a week or more. Yeah,
they'll dine in on this all. They'll dine on this all winter. But anyway, we want to get
one more point on it. Just contrast that to what the Carolina Hurricanes did when they tried to engage fans with their post game celebrations, and the fact that they actually took a little heat from traditional hockey play. I mean, that's the reaction that. That's what teams should be doing and trying to connect to fans these days, particularly with, in hockey where, we have a flat cap because of the pandemic. I mean, we're not the only league that's having that.
Whichever league you're in, though, a player showing his displeasure to fans is never good news. I mean, I can always go back to the Patrick Roy times back in Montreal when he lifted his hands to the sky after he was booed, and you just knew right then and there that something had happened, and it wouldn't go away just like that. So
I'm not sure that's true, though. It's always been news, like when a player reacts. I mean, it's happened before, but we certainly report it when it happens.
I'm not saying it's not news. I'm saying it's always been the case that it's not good news.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just didn't hear as well.
I'll give you an example, and then we'll start the show. A okay player in Russ, Brian Cox, who played for. I think he played at the end of his career for the Jets, but he played for most of his career
Dolphins
for the Miami Dolphins. He came out of the tunnel at Rich Stadium with both birds flying. If you get my drift. He was an okay player, not a Hall of Famer, but an okay player. He's still hated to this day. If he walked on the field at I think it's called Highmark Stadium now, they'd throw snowballs at him. They hate his guts. And I think his son played for the Bills last year. But
that's funny.
Yeah, I think it was Brian Cox Jr. So, but we lost Kev. He'll be back in a second. But yeah, no, I mean, there's no winning when it comes to a player reacting to the all you're going to do is generate the ire of the fans even more by doing that.
Yeah, I mean, as an example, Baez had a game where he struck out at least 3 or 4 times, had no hits. Does he expect to get cheered after that when teams losing games and he, maybe has 3-4 home runs since he's become a member of the team and he's hitting below 250? In what world do you think, it's nice to be, I get what players want. It's nice when everybody pats you on the back and says you're doing great and everything else. But I think what people forget is in the corporate world, when you move up the ladder, that doesn't happen. And in the sports world, when you make that kind of money, it doesn't happen.
Okay, let's get the show started here. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Monday, August 30th, 2021.
I'm Karen Nice. I'm the Canadians blogger on HockeyBuzz.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
And I'm Michael Agello, and this is the HockeyBuzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. Kevin Allen, I believe, will be rejoining us any minute. Maybe he has some computer issues. Okay, we have to start with this, and that's why we brought Corinne on the show today, because Jesperi Kotkaniemi, 3rd overall pick in the 2018 draft. Am I right, Rob?
Yeah.
Okay. Figuratively flipped the bird to the Montreal Canadiens by signing a 1-year offer sheet for $6.10035 million. The 15 was his jersey number. The $20 signing bonus was a little signal from Thomas Dundon and the Hurricanes that this was revenge for the Sebastian Aho offer sheet. And Corinne, let me start with this.
Yeah.
The revenge or the response to the offer sheet to Aho from the Carolina Hurricanes should be a bouquet of roses and a thank you note.
Yeah, they should actually, because we got them to sign Aho to a very reasonable deal. And this isn't what it is.
I don't get this. I get this petty revenge bullcrap. Now, okay. I think the more interesting story here is from the Kotkaniemi side rather than the Hurricane side. We know the Hurricanes were looking to get back at the Canadians. I don't know why, but this is Dundon's.
You know why.
I think that was just good showmanship, to be honest. And the fact that they tweeted the news in French as well was just brilliant. I was like, nice troll job.
No,
seriously.
You know what? You know what it was, though, Corinne? It was like a corporate payback. Companies, when they get in these little wars with each other, they do things like this. And that's how Dundon's used to playing in that kind of sandbox. And that's why he was good. I always knew, and I probably said it the day this happened, that it would be retaliatory. And that's what most of the time offer sheets are retaliatory. And that's why I always say never none of the time, because you're always going to have one that's going to be, get offer sheeted by the other team too. That's always going to be at risk. So it's always a risky thing with that.
You know what I think, though? I think that Dundon's feathers were ruffled when Bergevin said that the Canes were vulnerable, more or less saying that they wouldn't be able to pay the signing bonus.
Right.
And they've decided to show him what vulnerable is now with that offer.
Now, here's the interesting part of this. Okay, first, Kotkaniemi is coming off his ELC. So this deal, the compensation will be a 1 and a 3 coming back.
Yeah.
And I want to go on that one first, Corinne, because Elliot Friedman reported a couple days ago that the Canadians, he wasn't sure whether they were going to match or not, but one thing that they might do in the interim, in the 6 days that are now 5 days that they have, is shop the 1 and the 3 that they would get in compensation for Kotkaniemi and try to get themselves a center who they like better than Kotkaniemi. Now, and he mentioned Christian Dvorak with Arizona, but what have you heard, and what do you think of that theory?
Well, what I have heard is Dvorak, like Hugh and Monahan's been mentioned as well, but he's got a modified no movement clause where you can list 10 teams he doesn't want to go to.
Right.
So I think that one is less likely. Plus, his older only signed for 2 years, whereas Dvorak is signed for 4 years at a 4.5 cap hit. Right. So that's quite team friendly. I don't see the Coyotes moving him for just that 1 and that 3rd, though, and. The other thing that the Canes did very well there was make their offer 6.1 million and not 6.1666 or whatever, because then the compensation would have been a 1st, 2nd, and 3rd.
Right.
So they've handcuffed Bergevin there. It's brilliant work by them, to be honest. And from the Kotkaniemi side, I can understand why you would sign that. Because, he's been in Montreal for 3 years now, and he's been saddled with, I'll say, offensively challenged wingers for most of the 3 years. And then he ended up being a scratch in the last 2 games of the Stanley Cup final. What's that about? I mean, if you look at his numbers, the guy is actually better in the playoffs than in the regular season. And so why are you going to bench him?
Well, the onerous thing here about, and we'll talk about the cap ramifications in a second, but Kotkaniemi, he only had 20 points last year in 56 games, 5 goals, 15 assists, and then scored 5 goals in the playoffs. 2 years in a row, he's played better in the playoffs than he has in the regular season. But now, with this offer sheet, no matter if they match or if they let Carolina have them, the qualifying, and this is more for Montreal, the qualifying offer for next year is 10% more than his salary, which is $6.7 million. And they were only offering him $2 million or $2.5 million on a 2-year deal, Corinne. So that's onerous.
I think actually that the qualifying offer has to be 6.1 million because there's 100% of base salary when you've signed after July 20th, 2020, I think. But yeah, that is a big blow to the Habs because on the same year, you're going to have Suzuki, who's going to need a deal as well. And if you give Kotkaniemi 6.1 million, a player who had, like you said, 20 points, so in a regular season would have been on pace for a whopping 29 points, 6.1 million, what do you give Suzuki? It's just that, that's why I think that Bergevin cannot afford to match that offer. He can't, because it's going to screw his salary structure. It really will.
So Kevin, I find while you're coming back here, I find the Carolina point of view on this fascinating. Now, Renaud Lavoie came out on the weekend and said this was not a Don Waddell operation. This was Dundon. This was all Dundon, and this was. I mean, you could see by them changing the Twitter feed to official Hurricane de Caroline or whatever. They changed it to French. They posted an Uno card. They all this little trollish stuff. I mean, this was revenge for Aho. But like I said to Corinne, revenge for what? That was a deal that turned out great for Carolina by matching it.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. But still, they signed an offer sheet on their player, and one of the ways that you send a message you're not going to do this to us is you send an offer back on their players. And in this case, I felt like this is almost the perfect storm because they had a guy that they were very interested in, a player, Kotkaniemi, and he knows players on the team. He is very interested in playing there.
Right.
They think he's ready to break through. Whether he is or not remains to be seen. They see him as a guy that could be plus 40 to 50 points. Who knows? Whether that's true or not. They looked at the situation and thought they could give an offer that would make Montreal think about it. And I think they did that with the 6.1. That's not an easy decision. I've asked a bunch of people within the hockey world, and everyone seems to be split. Some people say there's no way they're going to match. Some people say, of course, they're going to match. So, I don't know. I don't know what they're going to do, but I think Carolina, I do believe it was Dundon. I don't think it was this was Waddell's plan, but I think he's more than willing to, go along with this. But I think Carolina is happy either way. If they, if they don't get the player, well, they made an effort. They wanted to get him, and they didn't get him. And if they do get the player, they're very fine with that. As it was explained to me, they think they're going to finish high in the standings. They think this will be a late first round pick. We keep adding teams, which makes later round picks more and more or less valuable, if there is such a sentence. So it's a fascinating thing. I'm also amused too that it seems to be split down the middle. Some people think this is kind of a sophomoric, babyish thing to do by Carolina, and some of us are very entertained by it. I'm not sure. I'm kind of in the middle on it. I'm not offended by all this. I think it's kind of fun.
It's great. It's great content. I mean, I love talking about this. And Russ, let me just ask you this, because we sort of debated, on our little group chat over the weekend. I really think, and Corinne references, I really think Kotkaniemi has been mistreated by the Canadiens organization over the first 3 years. I mean, okay, maybe he hasn't played consistently in the regular season, but we said it 3 years ago. They rushed an 18-year-old number 3 overall pick into the NHL for no reason. They could have taken a little more patience with him, and he had a decent rookie year, and everybody said, okay, he's going to be great. But no, when you rush it, unless you're an Austin Matthews top of the draft, unless you're somebody who's for sure going to be a fantastic player, playing somebody at 18 years old is not something, for some players, is not a good idea. And I think he has suffered inconsistencies in his game because of that. But the organization has also been really tough on him as well.
Yeah, we said it right away. He shouldn't have been the guy that was thrown right into the fire like that. I didn't like that idea. As far as him also being like a young Finnish guy, at 18 years old, some teams get it and some don't, as far as there is a big change for these guys in their lives, their everyday lives, when they come to North America, and especially when they go to a city that, also speaks another language, that has a stress level for a young player away from the ice. We can't look at all these guys as robots. And I'm not sure that's ever settled in for him because of the way he's been treated there. Now, he's had multiple coaches, which is never good.
Right.
And like Corinne said, he was really good in the playoffs. Now, what do I think his coach did? I think he fell back on what a lot of coaches do and decided, I'm going to play somebody who's better on defense and a little harder to play against. Okay, but he was one of your better offensive players, and you gave up on that. And this year, I did see him using the body a little more. So I do see some changes in him that I don't think are getting noticed by the average, fan maybe, and maybe even by the coaching staff, like not enough. And you know what? You could only change a player so much, but this kid has a load of talent, and he does have friends in Carolina, like Kevin said. So if I were him, I'd have signed that deal too, just on the off chance that I could be out of there, because it's not going great for me. And this is the payday I deserve. Worry about next year. Like, I would take the raise too.
I mean, Corinne, go ahead.
What I did notice, though, as well, is that somewhere around mid-August, it removed any mention of the Canadians on his social media accounts. There was a big commotion last year when Max Domi did that, or 2 years ago, or whatever. And it didn't happen with Kotkaniemi. It's like nobody noticed. But what's really not shocking, but what really surprises me in this whole thing is that apparently the Canes were trying to trade for Kotkaniemi. So Bergevin knew that they were interested, and yet he allowed himself to stay in that very vulnerable, position. Well, he knew an offer sheet was possible. If you know that they're interested, what are you doing?
Corinne, let me ask you a question on that, because I mean, we heard prior to the offer sheet that there was negotiations that are broken up because they were way off in terms of amount. I heard the rumor that Elliot Friedman reported was they were talking a 2-year deal at around $2.5 million, and now he signs an offer sheet for over $6 million. Yeah. The reports were that they had talked trade with Carolina and that they weren't even close. And I'm looking at Carolina with their roster. They have Trocheck. They have Aho. They have a young center in Martin Neckish. I would assume probably the Canadians would, with their center situation after losing Danault and having Suzuki, that they'd probably want Neckish in return for Kotkaniemi. I don't know what the ask was, but I mean, apparently it wasn't even close.
I don't know, but yeah, that would have been an ideal scenario for the Habs. But what's really how can I say, kind of strange is there's no way he couldn't have had more than a first and a third if he shopped him around the league, right, and then he waited to be in this situation. So that I don't get. But also, sorry, I've lost what I was going to say there. That's good.
Okay, that happens.
I thought that only happens to me.
The only thing I would add, Corinne, is a first and a third sounds nice, but when you have a center shortage, it's not enough.
Yeah, I know it's not enough, and now he's stuck to, you can only have that compensation or match the offer sheet, which he doesn't want to do. But the one thing I found what I wanted to say earlier, it's the Canadians' way to do business, though. Whenever a player comes out of his entry-level contracts, it's up, bridge deal, and that's that. You're an RFA, you don't have much weight, you can't negotiate with us. This is what you're going to get. They did that with Galchenyuk. They gave him a 2-year, 2.8 deal. Yeah. And Bergevin probably thought, well, here you are. You're getting 2.5. That's that. Don't annoy me. This is the offer. Take it or leave it. A bit like you did with Markov and Radulov. Right. This is the money you're getting. Otherwise, nothing's happening.
I mean, Corinne, the thing is that right now, if they don't match, their number 2 center is Jake Evans.
I know.
That's not a good situation. No. So, and the other thing, and Kevin brought this up over the weekend in terms of the cap. If they match, they're over the. Even with Weber on LTIR, they're over. So they're going to.
Byron's not on LTIR yet, though.
No, but Byron's not a career-ending injury. He's going to.
No, it's not career-ending, but he's going to be out for at least 6 months. So I think he can go out.
Well, I think it's December that he's expected back. It's not even 6 months.
They could
buys them a bit of time.
Yeah, they could do a
make it worse.
Yeah,
What-
you're going to get better on April 15th. That's what.
One thing I would bring up though, because there has been a lot of buzz about Dvorak, and he is available for the right price.
Right.
If they could somehow figure out a way to do that, they come out of this smelling like a rose, because Dvorak is a very consistent player.
Yeah.
Like
But
maybe,
I don't think he's a second line center, Kev. That's the problem.
well,
no, but he's better than Jake Evans.
yes, that's
Yeah, he's
that,
better than
and
Jake Evans,
but he's a very consistent scorer. Like you look at his numbers, they've been good. I mean, he's not great. His upside isn't as high as Kotkaniemi, but plus there's cost certainty. You know what he's going to be for the next 4 years. The problem is, I agree that you're not going to get him for a 1 and a 3, so you're going to have to pony up a little bit more to do that. But that wouldn't be a bad option for them if that comes to that, because centers just aren't available.
No.
Yeah, and that what I think is that if Bergevin doesn't find a way to go and get a centerman, that it makes this mistake even bigger than it is already. Because if they start the season with Jake Evans on the second line, it's just like, what are you doing? Are you just planning on having a good draft because it's going to be in Montreal? Because that's what it looks like. No, but seriously.
Eric Stahl's still out there, Corinne.
Yes.
I want to say the last Montreal draft, I think it was Louis LeBlanc that was their pick.
Yeah, it was.
That didn't turn out very well.
Wasn't that just great? Let's make people happy and pick the French-speaking guy. Yay! And the fans haven't even learned since then, because whenever there is a French-speaking guy available, Dubois earlier this year, it was like, get him.
Do you remember the cloak and dagger that happened when they revealed Peter Svoboda as the first round pick back in the day? Corinne, you probably weren't born at that point. But,
no, but I've read about it.
Yeah,
it was Savar's book, I think.
Yeah, it was wonderful. Anyway, let's go around the horn quickly here, because since we don't have a final resolution on this, and I'm sure we'll keep getting updates over the next. I don't know when. The official decision is going to be announced. Maybe Montreal stretches it out the full 7 days.
I think they'll take their time. Yeah.
They're going to stretch it out.
But Corinne, do you think they'll match, or do you think they'll let him go?
I think they let him go. They can't afford to match it. They just can't, because, it throws everything out of whack. He would be the second highest paid winger forward on the Canadians behind Gallagher. That doesn't work.
I think they're going to do it out of necessity, and I think they're going to put Byron on LTIR or whatever they can do with Byron, because they know he's not coming back for a while, and I think they're going to finagle it.
Kev?
Yeah, I think they're going to let him go. Initially, I thought they were going to keep him, but from what I'm hearing, I think they're going to let him go.
Okay. I've been going back and forth on it. I think they're going to let him go. If they can, I think that Bergevin is going to expend all of his energy over the next 5 days to seeing if he can find an option out there as a center to fill the because he just really can't, put Kotkaniemi in there at $6 million, and like you said, Corinne, the Suzuki contract is looming. What are you going to pay him, 8 now? Because it just puts him in.
Well, he's a first line center, so you probably pay him. You're probably gonna have to pay him 7.
But you have to give him even more if you give that to Kotkaniemi. He can't afford that. Just can't.
It's only for 1 year. You can worry about it.
Yeah, but then the qualifying offer is the same next year, 6.1. So you don't have a choice.
Trade him, right? But they could trade him before that.
No.
For 1 year, you can't trade after matching an offer.
Once you match, he can't be traded. So, all right. In other news, John Shannon reported about a couple hours ago that he said multiple sources confirmed that a decision for NHL players to appear in the Beijing Winter Olympic Games will come this week. No one is confirming the decision, but as I understand it, if the NHLers go, all players and traveling personnel will have to be fully vaccinated. And that last line, Kev, you would think that's a no-brainer, but in Buffalo with Cole Beasley and a couple other players, and throughout the NFL, and I'm sure throughout the NHL, it's not a majority, but a sizable number of players who don't want to get vaccinated. And that will be, it could be star players. And you could have a player like, I'm just, I'm not saying that this guy is, but you could have a guy like Austin Matthews or Connor McDavid say, well, I'm not going to go because I want to go, but I'm not going to vaccinate, so I can't be part of this. So this is a complicating thing if they in fact do go.
Yeah, and we went through this with the Summer Olympics, and if you don't want to go, you don't want to go. So I mean, you got your choice, and that's the way it is. And but I'm glad they're going, or at least I think they're going. But I've kind of felt all along because players really have wanted this. Most players want to go to the Olympics,
right.
And even the players that don't, I've spoken to so many of them that now have looked forward to getting this in-season vacation. It's the time you get to promise your kids a trip to the Disney World, and you can do it. So, this could be a good thing. But I agree with you. I mean, society has people that don't want to get vaccinated, so the NHL, I'm sure, has them as well. So it's going to be interesting to see, though. I mean, like, it could really be disruptive for specific Olympic teams. Canada has overflow. I think the U.S. starts to have a little bit of overflow of talent now too, but not as much as Canada. But as you move down the ranks, you lose a key player. It's really meaningful. So, I think the vaccinations probably will have an impact.
The other thing about this, though, a problem that they had with the Summer Olympics, yes, all the athletes made it, but the athletes couldn't take all the people they wanted.
Right.
There was a blind and deaf swimmer who wanted 2 people with her, and one of them was to basically take her to and from the pool and help guide her. And that person was not allowed to go because it went over the limit. And I think because her mother wanted to go as well. So it is going to be kind of interesting if they put limits on this. They
already have, Russ. I mean,
Okay.
The players have been notified that nobody could go, and that was the issue. Basically the PA surveyed the players and said, look, it's clear they're not going to allow, people to go over. This is something we still want to do. And
will that keep some players from playing then? Like, will that?
No, I don't. Well, I mean, it could, but I don't think that will.
Okay.
Now, interesting. They announced the groups for the Olympic hockey tournament, and they have Canada and U.S. in the same group, Russ. It's Canada, the U.S., Germany, and China. And China as the host country. And I mean, China, we could see like one of those international. What was it, Kazakhstan that lost like 20-something nothing to?
Yeah, Peter Forsberg's record is in jeopardy. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Yes. So Canada, U.S., Germany, and China in one group. The Russians, they have them under ROC, so they must be still under the ban. So it's like, or OAR, Olympic Athletes,
yeah.
Right? But that's not a country group. But so OAR, the Czech Republic, Switzerland, and Denmark in the Group B, and Group C, Finland, Sweden, Slovakia, and Latvia. So Canada, what we're going to have, like we have almost every Olympics. Kev, is a Canada-U.S. match in the preliminary round that will be completely meaningless to what happens in the medal round if they play.
Well, it will be meaningless, but it will determine seeding, and that could be crucial. Depending on what the other division looks like, depending on who's on the roster, who's playing, and so forth. But there's usually some importance to it just for that reason. But I mean, I agree with you in the overall scheme of things. It doesn't, really matter. So at least they won't, face each other in quarterfinals or
right
like that. So
right now, the other bit of news, and like I said, we're gonna have a shorter show today. The report, Mike Harrington of the Buffalo News reported it yesterday. Rumors had started to leak out over the weekend that the Heritage Classic, and I looked this up just to make sure. The Heritage Classic has always been exclusively both Canadian teams, Montreal and Edmonton, and Montreal and Ottawa. There's, and this year, if the reports are correct, the Heritage Classic will be in Hamilton at their new, relatively new football stadium, Tim Hortons Field, and it'll be between the Buffalo Sabres and the Toronto Maple Leafs. a Buffalo home game, which tells me that the Leafs didn't want to give up the gate at Scotiabank Arena, so they put it on the Sabres. And that is not part of the Sabres season ticket package, which would indicate that they've held it in abeyance for a Heritage Classic. Now, Kev, this is the thing that's a complicating factor, and I wrote about this. With the current restrictions with the Canadian-U.S. border, if they're still in place in March, they'll have to move this game, because there's no way for a Sabres home game that you're going to find thousands of people being willing, or the infrastructure being able to give PCR tests 72 hours before the game for everybody to be able to cross the border. If the restrictions are in place, there's no way they can hold this game.
If the restrictions are in place, this game is the least of our problems.
Sure.
Yes. So I mean, because that is a long time. That's the spring and March. And I mean, I know what you're saying, but I'm sure they're looking at that as a long range deal. And, I mean, you can always just move it to the inside the arena and play the game. And if you had to, and so be it. But, it's almost like they threw Buffalo a bone a little bit, because they know it's going to be such a mess there. Because, what a fun. If that game goes off as scheduled and being an outdoor game, having two teams that and their fans can drive to it, kind of like what happened here in Michigan when we had, because that to me, that what made that game was all the Toronto fans trudging in. What's forgotten about all that is, Michigan was in the midst of a terrible recession. Like I live across the street, even though I'm kind of in a rural setting. I have 5 acres. Across the street from me is a very large subdivision, and about every third house was in bankruptcy and foreclosure during that period. Like, there was no money whatsoever, and a lot of the Red Wings season ticket holders sold their tickets because the Canadians were offering so much money for them. Like, they felt almost like they were obliged to do it. And people have called it even, the number of fans, but there were more Toronto fans.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know. There were more
than Detroit. But what I love, the part that I love most was that they were paying astronomical amounts to go see that game, but by God, they were not going to pay $30 for parking. So they would walk. You saw them because the snow was coming down, and they'd be walking with their heads straight forward. They're dressed in all their thing, just not refusing to pay that $30 or $40. They park. They marched 2 or 3 miles and parked for free.
This is what I don't understand. Less so it occurred when the World Junior was here in 2018, but when the World Junior was here in 2011, that was when the Russians made that third period comeback and beat the Canadians. I think it was 6-5. There was a big scandal regarding the increase in parking around KeyBank, what's now KeyBank Center. They were charging $50, $75, and Canadians, once they heard that, Kev, were parking in Fort Erie, walking over the bridge and walking 2 miles to the
awesome.
In January rather than pay. And I'm like, wait a second. Most of these people are coming from Southern Ontario, where if you go to Toronto, you're paying $30 Canadian for parking, and they're, you know what it is? It was $30. It was $75 American. That's what it was.
But I also have to tell
that's
you,
about $500 Canadian. I'm exaggerating a little.
It became treacherous to walk. It was slushy. It was freezing. Like, I wouldn't have wanted to walk. I remember I went down and saw the festivities and came up, and I felt like I got up there just in time because the walking was going to be so bad. But I think this is a terrible idea to have the Sabres in there, because their TV is down 35%. That's how much they're down for their TV viewing. And if it's going to get shown in the U.S., which it will, it could be more this year. That's one thing. Yeah. Another thing is what Mike said. And then the other thing is, generally, the outdoor games, you want to market to fan bases to teams that are good, and the fan bases will spend a lot of money. The Sabres fans have stopped spending money, so I don't know how many jerseys they're really going to buy. And this will be their third game too. So for people complaining, so this is where Kevin's right. They are definitely throwing them a bone because it's not like they owe them a game. They've already had their 2 games.
Yeah.
This will be a 3rd game for them.
Well, Corinne, is this a symptom of Canadian division hangover? They didn't want 2 Canadian teams because you just saw an entire season of Canadian division, Canadian versus Canadian, and they said let's throw a bone to the Sabres. I mean, it's probably going to be 2,000 Sabre fans and 22,000 Leaf fans.
I don't think it is, because it got old to always play Canadian teams, but for outdoor games, I don't see anyone, being mad that 2 Canadian teams would be playing one another. Right. I think it's what Kevin said. They threw a bone to the Sabres. I mean, the poor fans have nothing to hope for right now. No. Eichel doesn't want to play. He doesn't want to be there. That's their big player. So what's going to happen to them this year? God knows.
That's one less game that Sabres fans are going to have to go to.
Yeah, but Buffalo's kind of an honorary Canadian team.
Yes.
Too. I mean.
They are the home of the Blue Jays. That's true.
Yeah, that's true, too.
Hey, you want to know something? The Blue Jays stopped playing good as soon as they moved back to Toronto. When they were in Buffalo, Vlad Guerrero was an MVP candidate, and all of a sudden he's been
Mike, they don't want the Leafs to feel bad.
No, and by the way, in spite of the fact that the Sabres are going to be challenging in the Shane Wright sweepstakes, that doesn't mean that they're not going to win that game, because it doesn't matter how good or how bad the Sabres are, they always beat the Leafs. So it doesn't matter. It's true. All right.
Not bad.
Yes. Yeah, don't say another word, Corinne, because we know what you're going to say. All right, we'll be back tomorrow with another edition.
What about the Dallas prospects? We're not.
Oh, I apologize, Ross. Please, give us your 2 Dallas Stars prospects.
All right, one of them is Maverick Bork, and he's a terrific center. This is a guy who's got a lot of speed through the neutral zone. He can play a lot of minutes. His fitness level is terrific. He's got a great shot. The stick and puck control is really good. And he had a nice little showing last year. He only got to play in 6 AHL games, but he did, and he had 5 points. This year, he may be able to stay in the AHL even at 19 if they – now, there was talk that they already passed the temporary thing, letting players, if they played over a certain amount of games in the AHL, stay there. I don't know if that's happened. We were talking about it at camp, and someone said it did, and I wasn't sure. So I'm not sure if they passed that yet or not, or if it's definite. But if they do, a guy like Maverick Bork will stay in the AHL and actually gain traction from doing it, because he really was scoring. Like 2 years ago, he was at 71 points in 49 games in the queue. So he's a guy that could really benefit from this. Again, not the biggest center at 5'11", but you don't really notice it. And he doesn't shy away from anything, but really the speed is the key with him. And he's a goal scorer as well as a playmaker. So that's a really good player for them to have. Another one is one of Anthony's favorites, Stankoven. And the thing about Logan Stankoven is he's a smaller center. He's around 5'8", 5'9". But again, he's got a pro body. He is a guy who is very sturdy. Now, I get that there's not a lot of 5'8" centers in the league. I get it. But he could be one. And I wouldn't count this guy out. He's really good in international play. He's got a hard, fast wrist shot. He plays in the corners. He's one of those guys that gets it because he's a smaller guy, knows that he has to do everything better. But again, this is 2 centers, and it's hard to find centers. And I think they found one that's a definite star potential and one that I think could be an everyday NHLer. So this is good for them. Good for Dallas.
Good job. Okay, we will be with Corinne. Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate your perspective on the Kotkaniemi situation, and maybe we'll have you on again next week when we have a resolution to it.
I'll be there.
Okay. For Kevin Allen, for Corinne Hines, for Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Agello, broadcasting from Canada's southernmost province, and and remember, without the buzz, it's just